Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation?
Mine spins in spirals like the course you throw. I think, therefore, but do I even know? Hume said the sun might not rise in the morning. Patterns ain't proof, just habits we adorn. Russell's teapot floating out in the void. Invisible doubts that can't be destroyed. Belief ain't a bird and the skeptic employs. Question the noise, the cosmos ploys. Skeptic's eyes always peeping the fraud. Truth ain't handed down, it's wrestled from the gods. Doubts my temple, my faith is flawed. Think it through twice before I applaud. Induction wobbles like a table with no leg. Hume's knife cuts leave certainty begging. A billion white swans, burn black renegade. Shatter the mirror, the cracks cascade. Cogito feels strong, but is it really? Thoughts build castles, clouds act silly. Russell's pot spins in the ether so freely. Prove it exists or the claim's too dreamy. Am I the dreamer or the dream in the show? The car wrestled devils, still didn't know. Faith and senses, they play tricks on a low. Truth's a mirage in a desert of woe.
When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you wish to believe or by what you think could have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Skeptic Philosophy. I am your host, Robert, as always. Today, we're going to be doing something a little different. The subject matter that we're talking about is in the description, and I encourage anyone to engage. We're going to put a lot more of chat on screen and try to engage more with the chat on screen. It has come to my attention that I have not been addressing the chat as much as I should. I think I do more of a host show, and I have guests on lately, and we talk and we engage a lot, and we're not interlocuting with the crowd, and we're not, putting stuff on the screen that a lot of the crowd is saying in the chat. So I want to try to do better on that. And I would like to, I believe, to do something of an open panel discussion at least once a month. On the channel, rather than doing a specific guest, to have it kind of open for anyone and everyone to come in. So that's my aim on the subject. But presently we're talking about theist, and whether it's Christian, whether it's Muslim, or any religion, and whether they are somewhat intrinsically compelled to tell lies to defend their position. And I want to extend this even further to the ideal that are there atheists or even anti-theists that have such an embedded ideal or concept that they will lie to defend that position. And if you are a theist yourself and you have examples of that, of atheists or anti-theists lying on a subject to try to maintain something, and that it's a clear and an unambiguous case of whether they're lying, I'd like you to come in and talk about those, or mention some of them, or even share links. We might even put some of the links on the screen. This is something that I'm going to get into a little bit with the links, and we'll discuss some of the ones that I'm familiar with, some that are just common semantics that happen all the time, and then some that might be more specific. I'm going to try to get one on the screen presently here that is more specific of a case where I think it's clear that's that we have a theist that's lying. Let me see if I can get it queued up here. Mm-hmm. But again, anybody in chat, if you have examples of this and you have engaged with somebody that is just dishonest in the conversation, and you have any examples of this that you wanted to talk about, by all means, please come in here. Would love to take a look at it, or listen to what you have to say about the subject. Let me see if I can get this one on the screen presently. Share screen. Okay, and please, everybody, let me know if you're having a problem with this audio. This is from Breakfast Tacos. This was Kurt, which has been on the show a few times, engaging with a gentleman that I think is engaging very dishonest. And to let you know some of the context, Kurt is trying to discuss the subject of randomness, and there is an unwillingness to admit that randomness even happens because it doesn't serve the rhetorical goals and narrative of the individual that he's engaging with. So just wanted you to hear
the
this as one
water
of the
that
examples.
splatters out of the pot because it is boiling. Does that happen randomly, or is it controlled by an agent?
It's controlled by the temperature that was set by an agent.
The things that it hits, are they directed and aimed, or are they random?
How would it, what do you, in what context could I quantify that?
When the water splatters, is the thing that it hits chosen by an agent, or is it random?
I don't know. I don't know.
Come
Maybe.
on now. Okay, you've demonstrated your poor faith here. You've demonstrated in the answer to that question that
your question's malformed. Your question's malformed.
All right, so that's one example that I've recently seen. This one happened about a day or 2 days ago, but there's a lot more of them that are just repetitive things that we see all the time that come from theists. And for those of you who might be just joining, we're talking about the subject of whether theists feel compelled to lie about the subject to defend their faith. And whether that's a trait that happens with all theists or specifically those that are engaging in apologetics, and whether this is something also, if you're a theist and you're on that side, whether you have seen people do it yourself that you've thought poorly of them, or whether you have seen atheists or anti-theists take a position that seems completely dishonest to misrepresent something. I want to know about it. I want to know about this dishonesty and engagement and this poor engagement. Another one that I wanted to bring up, the one that we see all the time. Let me see if I can get this one on the screen here. This is a subject. Well, shoot, I got to put it in a different window. Sorry. I'm ill prepared on this because I plan on doing something of just open mic. Anybody that wants to come in and talk about these subjects, you're more than welcome to. And if you think that I'm engaging dishonest, or please, by all means, call me out on it. If there's something that you have examples, though, of dishonesty, I'd love to know about it. So here's one on the junkyard tornado thing. This is one that if whether you're an atheist or a theist that just you understand how evolution and abiogenesis is two separate categories, and you understand how creationists engage with this subject of dishonesty, dishonestly, you'll know this conversation right here, and that's the junkyard tornado. And I believe even people like, I believe her name is Bree from Bread of Life. She used a scenario of soup inside of a microwave. And they talk about randomness, that the chances of that coming to life and dancing around, that the chances of it are so slim, you know, that this is impossible. And that they represent that this is basically what evolutionists believe, that these things can just come to life by random chance. And they do this tornado in a trailer park. It was one of the oldest ones of this. This is the ideal that that randomness is what fully accounts for everything that's going on. I see Kurt's coming in here. Hey, Kurt, how's it going, man?
Good. I'm on a slow Wi-Fi today. I'm in a hotel.
I understand. So did you get the brief of what we're talking about? And did you see that actually I brought you up from a video with Tacos of an engagement with someone that is being dishonest?
Oh, no, I didn't see the beginning of it.
Okay, so, and I don't remember who the individual was, but it was somebody that was, it's weird that you come in and I actually just showed a video with you on on Breakfast Tacos. He was about the water boiling and whether it's random or not, and he wouldn't admit. Yeah, he would not admit that a randomness was a thing.
Yeah,
he was kind of trying to block and get away from the subject.
He wouldn't even admit that water flowing down a hill is random.
Right. And I don't want to show all of it. I wanted to get into different kind of categories of what is, and I think this one that I am talking about on the screen is a very common one that people engage with very dishonestly. That they act as if that what evolution is claiming or what abiogenesis is claiming is something akin to being able to a tornado to randomly assemble something, as if the processes are random, and the processes are not random whatsoever.
Right. Well, there's randomness that is involved, but it ratchets. So if something can ratchet, then it's not going to go back to a previous state unless it's completely destroyed. And that's the key. There's constraint in all of these systems. So the constraints actually function to harness the randomness and make it do work, and not to like just do something where you're blowing up all the structure every single time, every single generation.
So what's funny to me is in the way that I keep this kind of divided in my head, I think about the randomness of the mutations, and then I can think about the selection process. And the selection process, if you want to call it that, and I know there's some misnomer in that, and we've talked about this a little before, but the idea that the pressures are somewhat selecting, this is not randomness. This is no more randomness than a coin slot that you jump a bunch of coins in, and the size and the fit of the coin slots selects or separates out all of the different coins into the different things.
Correct.
The randomness is the mutation. Now, the mutations are happening that are random, but what's being selected is just by what's fittest inside of that environment. But what's weird is they harp on the randomness. Oh, randomness did this, but the randomness inside a mutation is what is provable. That's a thing that we know in the genetics, that we're getting random mutations.
So for me, the main thing that I take away from all of this stuff is that the Darwinian mechanism is very important, and it's a very key way that we get diversity. But the idea that Darwinian mechanisms alone explain the origin of life, I think, is a misguided notion. We now know from single cell organisms that there's absolutely not just Darwinian mechanisms. There's gene duplication and repurposing, and there's whole genome duplications, and there's horizontal gene transfer. So that any successful system can be adopted by a different system in a process whereby any successful solution of a problem can be rapidly propagated throughout all the unicellular life forms.
So we have people like Eric Hovind and whatnot, and I'm sorry, I did delete the damn thing. I was going to put it on the screen. They do this, hey, Mighty Filbert, how's it going, man? They do this thing where they put these posts up about a sandcastle, and they say, oh, you think randomness could have created this? And do you believe that that is, especially from someone like Eric Hovind, we're not talking about a layman individual. He's been engaged in this for a long time. How can we see this as anything but engaging dishonestly with what the claim of evolution is?
Yeah, I tend to see it as motivated reason and cognitive bias. The people have a fixed idea of how they want their argument to work, and so they make sure that they turn the argument that they're hearing that someone makes into some sort of Procrustean version of it that fits their bed. But the reality is that even back when I was first learning cellular molecular biology, there was no way to make that argument fit what we actually saw on. And so a lot of it is to push people into the idea of that. So the only thing that matters, vertebrate is the only thing that's ever taken place, such that they can, single cells have all the machinery that multicellular organisms have. The only hard problem is getting to single-celled organisms that have the abilities. And then once they become multicellular, there's nothing really difficult about that.
Well, just to stay a little bit on task, rather than getting into all of the individual things, what I'm trying to focus on whether there is a disconnect, whether they are knowingly misrepresenting in several situations,
Yeah,
and
I think
whether there is
someone like Eric Hovind and someone like Kent Hovind, what they're doing is they don't want to address the unicellular to multicellular transition. So they just think about these large vertebrate organisms and how they would change. And that allows them to think, oh, my complaints haven't been addressed, because they don't see the analogy.
So then do you just see it as hyperbole when they do things like the sandcastle shit and say, oh, well, evolutionists believe this could be created, by random chance? Is that not something that you at least count as just absolute dishonesty and misrepresentation?
I don't know. It's really hard for me to get into their mind and say that they're being dishonest.
Yeah, sure.
The way I would phrase it is they have a cognitive bias that focuses them on themselves, and that they see themselves as like the central fact that needs to be explained. So they only want to understand what's going on with organisms like themselves, and they don't see the broader picture. And it is
Sure.
it's certainly possible that they have an internal representation where they can argue as if, I don't know, someone like Otangelo seems to have a fairly good understanding of what he's arguing against. So that's like,
Yeah.
to me, the more you have an understanding of the unicellular world, the less honest you're being when you're talking about something like the junkyard argument.
Right. And that's why I don't mention just some run of the mill individual. People like Ken Hovind and his son have been having this argument with evolutionary biologists for generations. So for them to reduce this argument down to something as simple as, well, they believe that random chance could bring a sandcastle, as if this randomness is the actual claim of what is building the thing. That this seems to be misrepresenting anything that they know is going on in the evolutionary claim, to me. But again, I totally understand your point,
Right.
and I do think there's a line to be
clear,
drawn there.
if we say yes, random chance makes glaciers and rivers, nobody has trouble with that, right?
Right.
The glacier, but they
Sure.
are brought about by random chance using the argument. Now, the fact is that they're constrained. There are certain physical characteristics that cause the energy to flow in specific ways that have like rules and principles that we can generate. But at no point does any agent create a glacier or a river.
Sure, but you will have some, such as Dustin, that you were engaging with, and I have ran into many of them myself, that they take the position that there's no good way to define what randomness could make, or just systemic pressures compared to God. So what they do is they say that basically all of it is God, and they won't even admit their randomness or things like this are a thing. I've had the argument about snowflakes and asked, do you believe that snowflakes and the complexity and the symmetricness of snowflakes, that this is designed by somebody, or that this is a systemic pressure? And I have had people tell me, Kurt, well, yeah, that's God doing. The God is designing them. Yeah, in some sense. Yeah. And they hold this line.
There's a school of thought within Islam, the Asharite school of thought, that says that there simply is no causation at all on anything, that the entire universe does not exhibit causation, that every single event is Allah willing it, and that when fire goes to cotton, the cotton is not burning. Allah is causing the fire to form in the cotton.
Yeah, I've heard something very similar to this. I heard an Arabic saying that it was something like, it's if Allah wills it, and it is willed by Allah, or something like that. That is how things come to be. I'm trying to think exactly how it was, but yeah, I've definitely heard that is an Islamic subject.
And then again, if you hold that position, then I don't know that you're necessarily lying. It's just it's an explanatorily inert position, right? You cannot do analysis or understand anything on the basis of that belief.
But some people run to it also, though, Kurt. They run to it whenever they're troubled inside, like such as the conversation that you were engaged in with the other day. It seems like they're running to something similar to that. That, well, we don't know what anything's not really random, and he doesn't want to outright say it, but this is he's running to this for protection, and this seems to me just intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, I think it's like solipsism, like the move to explanatorily inert positions is just a move where you've seen what's running towards you and you're ducking into whatever corner you can find to avoid getting hit.
Hey, Dade, how's it going, man? This is open. Anybody want to come in or give any examples of anything that they think that someone was engaging with them dishonestly, or whether it is a theist, an atheist, or so forth? By all means, please come in or drop something in the chat. So I had something on the screen a moment ago, which is another position that is regularly given that I'm not sure to what degree it is being engaged with dishonesty. And there's the idea that Jesus loves you unconditionally, and how people rectify this within all of the conditions that are stipulated.
With hell.
Right. So this is something that it seems like you'll even hear pastors and whatnot will say this, that Jesus loves you unconditionally, and then begin to state all of the conditions in which or they have the dissonance. They have the idea that Jesus can completely love you, but send you to hell forever to burn in pain and suffering. And I don't really know how they rectify this, a love that is unconditional with these types of things, and whether they're engaging with this dishonestly. And this is just that they want to maintain that they're so grounded in this position that they have to have this position of unconditional or agape like love, because they think of it as something that is it's great, or it's value laden, and that they just have to maintain that God has this. And it is just their, connection to being loyal to that idea, that they overlook everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I don't know. Like when I was a theist, that was a common problem that I had with people, where they would be willing to forgive not everything, but then they would claim that God would forgive everything. And then I would be like, well, then, so what are you doing here? Because you're like acting as if this person has done something that you can't forgive. Therefore, you're not acting like God. And honestly, you should not forgive everything. As a person, like, you've got to just move on when something's clearly not working out, and just let it go. And I just think that this is another one of those, like, not explanatorily valuable terms people will use to be able to say something, feel like they've answered an objection, and then move on. Now, my position is the actual original Christian position is universalism. I don't think that in the actual text of the New Testament there's any other good explanation but universalism.
How's it going, man?
It's me. No, I'm not going to do it. Hey, guys. Well, so you guys know of bread of life, Rebecca. So I was on B.S. Lewis's hangout there, and
I was there too.
Chat, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk. You want to talk about evolution, right? And in line with what you guys are talking about here, this is relevant, I swear. I don't know that I'm not going to share her email, but her email address. But here's the interaction. Hi, Digger Man. I'm usually free on weekends. Let me know when you want to talk. And I'm like, I said, I think I'm doing things tomorrow, whatever, What time is good for you? I'm Eastern Standard Time. I'm busy on Sunday, but I could make anything. So I'm like, all right.
Of course,
I'll make a date time.
Sunday, you know that.
Yeah. And then I said, okay, how about next week? And I'm busy next week, out of town next weekend. What is your name? Okay. So I said, my online pen name is Dan Green, because nobody knows my real name. Nobody's going to ever know my real name. What daytime would be good? Sorry, I don't get a good feeling about you, so let's forget it. So, I think that there's some, she's chickening out because she's seen, what I
in
do.
fairness, hey, in
And,
fairness, the converted. In fairness, it could very well be that she saw your profile, your YouTube channel and whatnot, and just wanted to slowly vet you, see a little bit about you and whatnot, and then,
yeah.
you
No,
know,
she's a,
made a judgment from there.
yeah, no, yeah. I've had plenty of talks with theists.
Yeah.
You know, I have a whole playlist of it. So, you know, it'd be the same thing. I would just ask her questions about what she believes and why, and it would be an interview. That's it.
Sure.
But you know, she knows she's a liar, and I would expose that. So you
Come
know,
on, come on.
no,
You're not
no,
everybody's cup of tea, though, D-man. I'll be honest.
yeah,
You're
you
not.
know,
You're not
well, 'cause
everybody's cup of tea.
well, I mean, you know, I just go for the truth, and you know,
There you go.
I don't play around. You know, I'm like, hey, look, you answer this question, yes or no, and you know, we're not gonna BS around with, you know, like, oh, what do you mean by what's it, yes or no or anything like. You know, I just like no, it's just let's be honest here. So you know, when you have a scam that you want to run, you don't want to deal with a skeptic.
Hey, let's address this one then right quick, and then I want to go back to Dade Murphy's on the subject. Unconditionally equals agape love. Where are you getting this definition from? You got a lot of background, D-man. I'm hearing keyboard typing. I'm hearing everything going on, man. You're hot micing.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna bring your volume down a little bit too on you. First of all, I don't know that there's a direct association with agape and unconditional, but it has regularly been represented that God or Jesus has unconditional love for us. The agape is just seen as a divine love. It is a separate love or a greater love. I think that church people regularly make this association. Not that there's anything that is in the Bible that makes the association that agape love equals definitionally unconditional love. So that having been said, I think that's pretty standard, though. We hear that position all the time from Christians. I did want to we had this from Paul, notoriously laid in order to win souls the faith. He even said as much in 1 Corinthians. I think Paul, at very least, lied about the subject to become prominent among Christians, that he throwed all the shade on Peter like he did and tried to take the reins, so to speak. But the other apostles didn't want to kind of let him into the group, but he kind of hijacked Christianity. And that was I think he called himself the last apostle, but he kind of put this down that seemed like this was a complete just dishonest story. And he had never actually walked with Jesus. So then he became an apostle, not from the other apostles accepting him like Matthias or something, or casting lots. He just came from the outside and said, yeah, I'm an apostle. Jesus appeared to be in a vision. And then he just worked his way into it. So I would say that if there's anything that we could say is dishonest, this is dishonest. I mean,
if there's a narrative that counteracts, that corresponds, I should say, to anything like the traditional narrative, then Paul is certainly anti-Petrine and anti-Jerusalem pillars, right? If that narrative has any reality at all. But we don't have any external attestation of that story. That's just within confessional documents, what we now understand. So from the point of view of the original New Testament, you only have the anti-Petrine faction recognized in the earliest stratum, which is Marcion's New Testament. And so the New Testament that we have now has the Petrine faction and, the Epistle of James, the Epistle of Jude, the Book of Revelation, all of these, like, actually you have to keep the whole Torah, like the Gospel of Matthew, right? The Gospel of Matthew is not in Marcion's New Testament. So there's two initial strains. Have you read Burton Mack's book on who wrote the New Testament? It's really, really good. But he identifies, like, there's two strains. There's the Torah observant early strain, and then there's the Torah unobservant strain. And the epistles that we have of Paul clearly are like Torah unobservant.
Yeah. I wanted to address something that Mr. Gill over here said, that please no more conspiracies. I don't think that it's a conspiracy, that there's no text whatsoever from any apostle that accepted Paul as an apostle. There's just not. So he declared himself an apostle by his own authority. Well, he'll claim Second Peter, but we know Second Peter wasn't from Peter, and I mean this is the overwhelming scholarship that this is pseudepigraphic. So
yeah, and it's a harmonizing later text to try to make the book of Acts make sense.
A tangent question, but I can't remember if there's some doctrine that closes the loophole that he creates, because, or whatever you might want to call it, is like anyone could claim that Jesus spoke to them in a vision.
Sure.
And then, say, Mormons have this problem. There's been a lot of cults because of Mormon. You can just be like, oh yeah, I know, I'm receiving the messages. Did they close that in Christianity?
Yeah, with the Montanist heresy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Eusebius did the whole that they're putting out hundreds of documents per day and all, that the Montanists that they're having all of this euphoric experiences and all, with the two prophetesses that were regularly making stuff up along with the leader of the Montanist movement.
Yeah, Tertullian, I think, ends up becoming a Montanist, which is sort of funny. Like, so many of the church fathers end up being heretics.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Origen was already heretic by 400, and then we have even people that are biblical characters that were supposedly very close to Paul, such as the lady that was close to Paul that we see in Acts and whatnot. She's runs with the Montanists as well, Priscilla. So now she's one of the heretic prophetesses that have left Paul and that ministry, and she's gone off now into a false ministry. So there's a lot of people that wind up going on to other movements, and I do think you're right. Montanism there very early was a big one. So the doctrine of the Trinity is heretical. Well, yeah, I mean, you had a lot of people early on that was saying the doctrine of the Trinity was heretical. And I think the ascension of Isaiah was one of the big pushes that made that doctrine happen. In the book of the ascension of Isaiah in chapter 8 and 9, we get this idea of God and Jesus being two separate entities. And this book was representing that it was written way back, that it was written before the Christian movement. But in reality, we're talking about 180, 190. This book was written maybe as late as 200. And it's kind of one of the earliest artifacts that are representing that Isaiah, way before Christianity happened, that there were these two individual beings inside of heaven that Isaiah saw.
Yeah, there's several strains of the ascension of Isaiah, and I do think that the vision of Isaiah, the central section of that text, may date back much earlier, and may date back to like even the 1st century.
You say the central section, the ideal of Jesus and God being two separate characters in
Jesus
heaven?
changing his clothing, he goes down through the 7 layers. That may be a very early text, and in fact, first, from my personal opinion, I think that text may be the original vision of the crucifixion, the original like source of the idea that the temple, as above, so below, had been figured in heaven by the crucifixion of the suffering servant of Isaiah.
Interesting.
So the textual evidence for that is that in the Septuagint version of Deutero-Isaiah, the suffering servant also called ho agapetos, the beloved. And in that central section of the ascension of Isaiah, the vision of Isaiah, that is the exact term used in the first identification of that character.
Yeah, I knew it was very influential in the early church. But I think there's still a lot of debate on the book. As far as the time, I know that it was influencing the early church.
Going back to the question at hand, because I'm going to get off in after this, but I've been reading a book on self-deception, and that in order to lie to somebody else, you have to lie to yourself to make it, if you convince yourself that it's true, then it's not a lie anymore,
Right.
And so it's
the
like
George from Seinfeld
Yeah. If you, yeah, right, exactly. If you believe
it's
it's
not a
true,
lie
if
you believe
if
it.
you believe it, right? Well, there's some truth to that, and talks about how it's developed and all this nitty gritty of that. So there's that gray area where it's like, well, you really believe this versus at some level that what you're saying is nonsense. And it made me remember this fair that I went to when I was just a brand new skeptic, I suppose. And the guy was selling candles, and they're known to do all these wonderful things. And I'm like, yeah, right, prove all. He gets all mad. He's like, are you calling me a liar? I'm like, well, you're not proving it. He's like, oh, they were made in a mountain on Fiji. And I'm like, tell you weren't. Come on. And he's all mad because I'm exposing what he knows to be a lie, and but yet there was something there. Like, he got so angry, he wanted to beat me up. He's like, "Come on, let's go," and I'm like, no, But it's like that anger, frustration, whatever, all to mask that you've struck a nerve. You've found their you found that they're not being honest. And I think with what's his face Hovind guy, whenever he says let's go slow, let's slow it down, that's his like defense mechanism. Everyone has their own defense mechanism, it looks like, to me.
Yeah.
People will go to precept or whatever as their defense mechanism, and I always try to go, well, because I always try to bring it back to skepticism and myself and us, and say, well, am I doing this, and how can I be aware of this myself so that I'm not falling into the same trap. So anyways,
I think that's a big problem. Yeah, good. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm not feeling too great. So, but yeah,
I
thanks,
understand.
guys.
Hey, yeah, appreciate it, man.
Right, later, DM.
I'm curious about that subject, where kind of the line divides when somebody's holding a position, and the core position, there's this idea that seems to be stumbling. Let's say that as you're arguing, as you're debating with them, you're kind of knocking the legs out from under it. It's individual pillars, and they kind of adjust and grow new legs, so to speak, to hold that prime ideal up. If this is this what we call dishonest? Will we at least say that this is dishonest to support the bigger thing that they believe? Like, I understand that they believe the bigger thing, but when we're knocking the legs out from underneath that, it's so important that that be held up, that the legs or that concepts adjust and like make variations because they're subservient concepts to the bigger concept, because the bigger concept, it just has to be true. And in that sense, do we at least say when they're moving those posts and those legs, that they have some conscious awareness, or they should, that they're being dishonest and they're engaging dishonestly?
So are you familiar with Harry Frankfurt's book on bullshit?
No, can't say I am.
So Frankfurt distinguishes three characteristics. So there's the case where you know the facts, and when you make a statement about the facts, you're saying what you know to be true, and that's telling the truth. And then there's a statement where you know the facts, and you're making a statement that goes exactly against what the facts that you know are, and that's lying. And then he carries a third position, which is that you're making noise that will hopefully have a behavioral effect on the person who is listening to you that you want, and you don't care if the noise you're making is true or false. And he calls that bullshitting. And I do think that some of what's going on here is bullshitting.
Yeah, that's a pretty cheap book there too to pick up.
It's a fantastic book. It's spectacular.
So there's a little bit of going back and forward, I think, in chat, and we'll try to bring a little bit of it into the conversation. There's no analogy that works perfectly with the Trinity. I agree. I've heard this said over and over. No one seems to like the analogy, but the reason that no analogy works perfect with it is this for the same reason that a cubicle sphere analogy doesn't work, that it breaks down at some point. And that's because these are mutually exclusive incompatibilities. So of course, everything breaks down at some point. It can't be. But that's my thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, no, on the Trinity, you can read the creed and then you won't be a heretic. If you do anything other than read the creed, you're going to be heretical.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving to the next one, about what I think people sometimes engage with dishonestly, whether they're calling it lying or whatever. It's a claim that we see over and over, and that's the claim that you can't be good without God. And I think that they have almost shifted what good is to the degree that good is only that which serves God. Now it's not good in far as how it relates to people and other individuals, because it seems that they used to think that early Christianity kind of had this idea that if you're not a Christian, that you're basically killing babies kind of idea. But more and more that we have non-religious people or religions of all kind that interact in societies very normally, and give to charities and everything's like this, I think it's difficult to maintain the position that was held of old. And now there's something of a shift that good almost has to mean something else now, because we see thousands of people that don't believe this story, but they seem to simulate what was originally thought of as good in the way that they behave.
Well, this is just a question of you have like two horns here. First, are you a moral realist or a moral anti-realist? And you can be a theist and be a moral anti-realist, and you can be an atheist and be a moral realist. So if the question is moral realism, it doesn't solve the problem of theism regardless, right? There are people in both camps of both positions. But then the second question is, if you are going to go with moral realism, then you're giving up on the morals coming directly from the God as a matter of choice. Like, God can't be directly morals by a matter of choice if you're a moral realist. The moral realist has to exist separately from the person making the choice about what's moral. So if that's the case, and again, I think divine command theory is a moral anti-realist position. But if that's the case,
absolutely,
then God can't be good either. And in fact, like skeptical theism, which is one of the main solutions to theodicy, is then putting God out of the position of us being able to make a moral judgment about it. If you're a skeptical theist, we can't say that God is good or bad. We can only say that he is God.
Yeah. So, but what has shifted when people in the past have said that people can't be good without God, that they're not talking about that they have to be godlike characters, but that the characters that they attribute have to be good or good for society. Is what my understanding of what people are talking about. But now that seems to be a shift specifically in apologetics, because now they're still wanting to maintain the position that you can't be good without God. But normatively and in our behavior and how we interact, we both exhibit charity, we exhibit compassion, we exhibit all of the characteristics that are generally defined as someone who is good. And we see people that do this regularly, but they don't really have a God.
Yeah. The theist argument, I think, is coming from a position of that any goodness in the universe is coming from the God, regardless of whether the person doing goodness is acknowledging. It's the Jordan Peterson move, right? You're
doing it because of God. You just don't know it.
You don't God. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that has to be to some degree, if not dishonest with society, it's intellectually dishonest and not consistent with their own internal ideologies. This is I guess a fairly recent one. I think it goes back as far as Lewis.
It starts with Lewis.
Hell is a choice. I think that is the origin of it, and it's now been very widespread concept. I don't believe it poked up anywhere before then, though, and that I think this idea is just dishonest.
Like, I do think there is a strain in orthodoxy that imagine theosis as being negative for some people and positive for other people. And that strain probably does go back to earlier than Lewis.
Okay. All right. But we regularly hear this now. This is a very apologetic thing that tries to defend, and I think it's coming from a place of defending the moral ground on which God is perceived to stand. So the more and more that we have atheists or people questioning the religion to say, how is this moral? How is it possible that God is moral, but is sending someone to hell to burn forever and ever and ever? How can we rectify that? So now, instead of saying what we were talking about earlier, that God is still loving and he's sending someone, to this place, then we put it up with, well, they're choosing it. They chose it because God created a dichotomy of you have to do this or therefore that. And the dichotomy it can't be moved. It can't be moved. So therefore people are choosing hell. As if they have to know that they're going to hell for just not believing in an ideal or a concept.
So on the Protestant view of the plan of salvation, where they're like this being Satan and this location hell, I just think that's complete nonsense, right? If I build a torture chamber, it's because I'm planning on torturing people. So if you believe that there's a constructed hell and that hell is a place of eternal torment, I just don't think that argument holds any water at all. Now, on the position where alienation from the good causes a existence here on earth, the Jordan Peterson move again, sure, I that's fine. You can make that position. That's acceptable. But you've basically given up on the idea of a standard Protestant plan of salvation if you're going to make that move, which unfortunately I hear Protestants making that argument, and it just doesn't make sense.
Well, I've also heard the argument, though, in fairness, that hell doesn't presently exist, that it's a future thing, and that we do the blink of the eye, that everything will be like the blink of an eye.
That doesn't make any sense of Luke.
I know it doesn't make any sense of Luke, but it is a position that, I mean, I've definitely heard before, and they compare hell to the Revelations, the fiery pit there that kind of comes about, but that no one's in judgment or anything right now, that no one's in hell or in heaven, so to speak, and then that this thing is just going to come about.
When I was a theist, we were annihilationists and didn't believe that there was an extant hell because we focused on the Proverbs and Pauline statements about the dead know nothing and the people being asleep in Christ.
Yeah.
But Luke is pretty clear cut that that's Jesus himself talking about events that he is saying are taking place, because what would be the point of the rich man complaining and wanting people to know if it's not happening right then? Right. There's no point of that whole story if it's not taking place in the time that it's being described.
Yeah. I mean, people try to account for that in different ways.
And again, to me, like, if you can be a biblical errantist and then have this opinion, that's fine. That's no problem. Jesus didn't say that. That's Luke writing that. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual teachings. That's all acceptable. But if you're a biblical inerrantist Protestant, that move is just not available to you, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So we're gonna put one more up here that I have. We've always heard something similar to this, and you hear it in different formats, and that's that Jesus had to die for your sins, that God wasn't able to simply just forgive. That there had to be that there's this thing of internal consistency of sacrifice, that these steps have to be gone through. Whereas the ideal, if God has the power, if he wants to forgive sin, he can just forgive it. If the sin is against God, it's completely and totally in his hands to forgive it. And I know that this has been pushed back on from many Christians in many different apologetics, that this isn't necessary. This is all just a dog and a pony show of Jesus being sacrificed and whatnot, that God could say, forgive it, and it's done. But they have to maintain that this was important. This had to happen. not that God is not the one with authority, but that God has to have some internal consistency that he can't just forgive without a blood cost.
Yeah, so this goes back to the passage in Mark where Jesus describes himself as a ransom, and also like there's just all over the map Christian history on this, right? So there are exemplary Christians, there are substitutionary penal atonement Christians, and then there are Christians who claim that it's a way of unifying mankind with God through God's experience of the cross. But my position is always, well, oh, how many gods, right? Because
Yeah.
if there's one God that died, then that's patripassianism, and that's a heresy. If no gods died, then Jesus, the man, is the only thing that died. The divine nature did not die. Therefore, there was no actual sacrifice of the divine nature. And if three gods died, then that there was a period of time when the universe didn't have a god.
It didn't have a God at all. Right.
So I just think again that like the Trinity is pretty much nonsense. I was reading a very interesting précis of a book. I haven't read the whole book, but it's by a New Testament philological scholar who's an expert in the Greek and about the various mistranslations into the English Bibles. And he's very careful, and apparently his position after going through all the major translations is that the single best translation of the New Testament from the Greek is the Jehovah's Witnesses Bible. That they were the most fair and most honest about what the Greek actually said, which I thought was pretty amazing.
What about Ezekiel 18?
Witnesses are not Trinitarian, right? So they translate all this language as non-Trinitarian. They're Arian.
Right. Which I think that we now have the majority of critical scholarship. They don't think that there's anything intrinsic in the book. They think Trinity is a post-biblical concept that was used to try to rectify certain ideologies that might even not be canonical, might be from some books that are now not canonical.
Right. So my weird theory is that Mark's ransom is actually being paid to the demiurge.
Okay. All right.
So that the demiurge is the thing that needs the ransom paid.
Right.
Therefore, now the good God above can actually bring souls into contact with him through the faithfulness of Christ. Now, again, this gets back to that English translation. Paul routinely uses the phrase pistis Christou, which he translated faith in Christ. But you can also translate it the faithfulness of Christ.
Yes, I've heard this. Yes, absolutely.
So if you're using it as the faithfulness of Christ, then that fits entirely with the ransom to the demiurge model. And that would fit with destruction of the temple and end of the Levitical sacrifices.
This is something of a contradiction it gets brought out from time to time. What about Ezekiel 18, where it says that the righteous man cannot die for the sins of the wicked? I think that it is something of a contradiction, but it's something of an ideological difference. But they did have this sheep idea that even the animals that are dying, that they're being sacrificed, that what we're doing is they're taking on our sin and our wrongness. So I think that while Ezekiel says this, I think there's already ideology that says that basically these scapegoats, so to speak, are taking on the sins and they're taking it away and they're dying for it. So I think the concept was already there way before Ezekiel.
Yeah, and the idea of salvation being brought about by the cross is a fairly difficult one, even for first and second century Christians to get across, because they're aware of this whole human history going back into the past. I mean, this at this time is an innovation that's 100 or 200 years old. So they have to explain, how did this actually work for all mankind when it just happened, right? So that's where the doctrine of the harrowing hell comes in back then, where Christ actually went down on the Saturday and like cleaned out Hades of all of this people who have been righteous and then brought them to a state. But now there's almost no emphasis on that harrowing of hell because people don't even realize that how long ago this was. And so they think, oh, well, Christ's sacrifice was good for all mankind all at once. But it really doesn't make sense. And this is where, like, was Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, were they all like capable of making a moral claim, or were they not because Christ hadn't died on the cross yet?
On the cross yet, right? And when that weekend happened that Jesus went down to hell, was that the same weekend that he went over to America and talked to the Indians for the Mormons?
Yeah, no.
I just want to know if it was the same weekend.
Okay. It was a different time.
That's a different time. Okay. Let's move to the next one here. The claim that slavery was done away with in the Bible. We see this over and over, that we see apologists defend the idea that God didn't want slavery, in complete contradiction to the book.
These people have clearly never read Ephesians.
Right, exactly. And not just Ephesians, but there's two different camps.
Or anything.
Yeah, there's two different camps. There's those that think that it was done away with inside of Christ, and there are those that think that God never condoned or was behind slavery, which those have to have just not read the whole damn book, you know. And it seems to me, even when you point some of these out, they've already taken the position, and we're talking about the pillar things earlier, that you have this ideal that it's held up. And I think they have the ideal that if God supported slavery or people being enslaved, that they might have think of him as immoral. So that when you show them scriptures where this is in fact the case, that God said you can take slaves from this land and buy slaves, and you can even give them to your next generation in perpetuity, that, you know, when you see things, there's this cognitive dissonance, a way for them to try to rectify this. Oh no, this was just, you know, everybody was let go on the after the 7th year and this, that, and the other. Right. Or all these kind of arguments. These are all coming about because of a necessity for them to rectify their ideal of slavery being immoral and God being moral. So they're moving that leg, so to speak, that I was talking about earlier. And the more you press them on it, the more they seem to pivot and shift. And this is another, it feels like lying.
Well, it might be lying. Part of it also is just the terrible translation again, right? So every single time in the Greek where it uses the word doulos, it should be translated as slave. That is the meaning. So when Christ is giving a parable about servants, no, servant is not the word. It's slave. All of those parables are about slaves. Is Jesus talking in these parables about an immoral institution that he thinks is fundamentally horrific and yet never mentioning that fact? I think that's highly unlikely, right? Once you accept like Trinitarian beliefs and the idea that Jesus is the God of the universe, if he's making all these stories that involve centrally the fact of slavery and ignoring the moral valence of that slavery in those parables, he's endorsing it, right? If I keep giving you like parables about how someone is a good grifter and how these grifters did this and these grifters did that, but I never actually mention, you know, grifting's actually bad, I'm pretty much endorsing grifting, even if I don't specifically come out and say you should grift people.
Well, I think it's even worse with this one, though, because I think we do get, and for those of y'all that are following, if y'all don't know what we're talking about, there's two verses that we've kind of mentioned here. One's Leviticus 25, 39, I think to 43. And I think the best reading of that is from the NRSV updated edition, or New Revised Standard Version updated edition. If you want to read it from there, you'll see what we're talking about. Leviticus 25, 39 to 43, 44, somewhere in there. And then the other one we're referring to is Ephesians 6, 5 through 9, where we're getting obey your masters in the Lord and those that have rule over you. And I think one of the words was translated as with, some of them translated as fear, with fear, but I think the best translation, my understanding is with trembling, to obey your masters with trembling. So
well, and
that's all the way
another
from old
valence.
to.
That's another valence that we don't get very much. Like the proper translation of Lord is actually no longer Lord. We think of Lord as this like old English title of someone who had like a plot of land with some peasants on it. But no, the correct English translation for the Greek kurios would be massa.
Huh. So
It
curios
would be
or
a slave owner. It would be someone who controls the
right.
individual lives of their slaves.
Yeah, well, you get this all the time that we are really servants or slaves to God. The,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
idea that so there's not a problem with slavery. Intrinsically, we are all his slaves.
Correct. So if like this is why when we're talking to Christians sometimes on the panel, you'll say, is slavery wrong? And they'll just fight to not say slavery is wrong. Why? Because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
central metaphor of the Christian
Right,
relationship
absolutely.
is to the massa, right? The massa tells me what to do and I do it. And that's why Justin on Deconstruction Zone keeps getting people who will say, yeah, if God told me to like grind babies up in an osterizer, I would do it. Because he's the massa and I'm the slave.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny play with that one. And we've seen it do the other way with the morality. We've seen that we've seen the question asking, is it immoral to kill babies, for example? And and they'll say, is it what is it? That is it objectively immoral? And people that don't have an objective moral position, they think that it's subjective, will say no. And then it looks like in an audience, oh, how dare them. But the caveat or the return to that is on divine command, if God tells you to kill that baby, is it right to do so?
Right.
And those that are consistent with their position, they'll say yes, that it is right to do so.
Well,
I asked the question, which one's scarier? I would say the latter is the scarier position.
The structure of both arguments is, in my opinion, a bit dishonest even there. So let's be clear. Like, do you remember the Michael Dukakis, George H.W. Bush debate where the guy says, like, if your wife were raped and murdered, would you support the death penalty? To a guy who doesn't support the death penalty. Okay, the only purpose of asking that question is to increase the emotional valence of the question. You're literally just asking him if he supports the death penalty, and then you're adding an emotional valence to it to make him afraid of admitting his position. And that's what all these arguments do. So to the degree that that kind of argument is dishonest, I kind of see it on both sides, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If someone is a moral anti-realist, you can expect them to, if they're being consistent, say, I am a moral anti-realist. And if someone is a moral realist, same token, right? If they're a divine command theorist, they're going to be a divine command theorist. And all the implications and all the weird stories you want to tell in front of your would you, none of those actually matter if the person holds the position consistently, regardless of whether it's digging up a corpse or throwing someone off a cliff or doing something weird that people think of as perverted. Here's what I would say. Is it objectively distasteful?
Yeah, I don't think you could say objectively.
Right? Is a sandwich with 2 pieces of bread and tar in the middle objectively bad?
No. Well, and that's why I use the poo example all the time.
Yeah,
like for the category. Like if everyone agrees that poo tastes bad, is it then an objective subject? It's quite semantic though. But anyway, the next one here is after the slavery came. I actually had a video that I wanted to show. This is Marai Emanuel. It is a priest that is playing with an Old Testament verse, and he is he does a lot of stuff with Muslims, and that Muslims are wrong about the eating meat, and that it was never wrong kind of thing, or eating pork. Let me see if I can get the damn link.
He's Jewish and he doesn't think it's wrong.
No, I think he's some kind of Christian. Look, give me a moment. Let me get the link up here. It's not working. I got something wrong with the link. Let's see. All right.
By the way, there are Christians who do believe because of their Christianity that it is also wrong to eat pork.
All right, I got it paused here. Now let me get it on the screen here. Let's see. Screen share.
Like Mr. Batman, for example.
All right, we got it up here. You can see it now. Let's look.
Why? Because the Lord God in Leviticus 11 says, any animal that has
He's
its
definitely
hoof
Christian.
not split,
Yeah.
if it's one piece, the hoof, the bottom of the foot, if the hoof is one piece, you do not eat from that animal. If the hoof of that animal is split, you can eat that animal. It is okay. The pig, the hoof of it is one piece. But I've mentioned this so many times, I'll mention it again. My beloved, pay attention. The Lord God was not talking about animals.
Okay, that's why I wanted to cover that. Two things. First of all, the hoof is split. It is split on the pig. It is not one
Right.
solid piece. And secondly, he's trying to make Leviticus out like it is not talking about animals when the verse
words don't mean words, of
right,
course.
right. Words don't mean words, right? So he turns this into that this is something else, and I want you to hear what it is that he's going to say what it's about.
The Holy Bible, both Old and New Testament, is one book that is the salvific book of God to the humanity. God is sending his salvational message to the human race. So whenever you approach the Holy Bible,
Okay.
It said salvational mess. That was funny.
Right. So this is just all hand waving. Look, none of this matters. Look, what matters is that God is about salvation. Okay.
Right.
So this is hand waving away. And I'll tell you who I found this from. I found this video actually from a Muslim that called him out on this. And I was like, oh, this is so perfect. This is so perfect. But I think that this is an individual that is engaging dishonestly with it. And when you look at the text in Hebrew 11 and you read 1-8 in Hebrew 11, it's clear that all of this is talking about what animals you can eat and whether they chew the cud and they have a split hoof or they don't. And we get to like the rabbit.
Are you talking about Hebrews or are you talking about a different book?
No, we're talking about Leviticus.
Okay, you kept saying Hebrew.
Oh, my apologies. Shit, I don't know why I said that. No, Leviticus 11.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, it's Leviticus 11. I think verse 1 through probably 8 or 11 is
Right.
is the text that we're talking about from here. But he's making it out like, first of all, that there's nothing wrong with eating the pig, and that it never was anything wrong with eating pigs. And this is just absolute bullshit. You know,
Right.
it was clearly against the law.
No, the key thing to me, like, you need to understand what Christianity is solving. Christianity is solving, how do we take these texts from this old ancient like religion, and how do we like generalize them to apply to all of mankind? So Christianity realizes early on, we're not going to get all of mankind to give up everything that they eat. And so we need to have something that's going to allow them to keep eating this. So you get the book of Acts where both Paul and Peter say everything is okay to eat. And you also have Mark with Jesus saying all foods are now clean, so that you can now spread this like document to the whole world and just completely ignore what's actually written in the text.
Well, shit, you could have told me I was muted. So the link
I thought I was having Wi-Fi problems.
No, it's not you.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. So the link that I put in chat, I'm not going to put a video up on it, but this is from Deconstructed Zone. This was a call-in individual. I'll let y'all take a look at that at your own leisure. But this individual called in. Thanks, Filbert. I appreciate it. Thanks for the heads up. But he called in and said that his leg was basically regrowed, that God healed his leg, that he was basically missing it. Right. And then he got walked all the way back to a diagram, and he had it up there, and he's like, okay, so some of your muscle was shot off on the back of your calf. And anyway, it's a hilarious video, but this is the kind of example of that I think people know that they're clearly lying, but they're trying to represent a concept that is so immaculate and so important that it doesn't matter that they tell these little white lies to make sure that they're upholding their upholding their position.
Well, and directly germane to the topic here, like really the founder of modern, like book-based Christianity with the apostolic tradition and all that is Eusebius of Caesarea, right? You can clearly see that, like, after Eusebius, the understanding of Christianity is fundamentally different
Shifted.
than
Yes,
before
agreed.
Eusebius. And Eusebius literally is the most dishonest historian
absolutely.
in history. He's not even a saint. He's not a saint in Catholic tradition, and he's not a saint in the Orthodox tradition. Like, the guy who created Christianity wasn't good enough to become a saint to either of the major strains. And the reason is because he's a liar. Full on. Like, there's his story of Constantine's conversion and other stories that predate his story that flatly contradict him. And
Absolutely.
in his text, he says, is it okay to lie to convince people to become Christians? Absolutely. You should do it any chance you can.
All in.
And there you're not reading that into him. You're reading what he wrote. So at its fundamental basis, any apologetic that's based on Eusebius's construction of the Christian history is, at least at the point Eusebius created his narrative, based on a lie.
Well, keep in mind, Eusebius is someone that could reach so far down in the bottom of the bucket of arguments that this is the first one that came up with the argument that all of the other gods that this religion shares similarities to was the devil pre-copying it before it was done.
That goes back further than Eusebius, though. Justin, I think, is the first one.
Oh, you're right, Justin. Yes, on first apologies or something. You're actually right.
Yeah.
I think Justin's the first one that did that in his. I think it's called.
I think he does it in the dialogue with Trypho, but I'm not 100% sure.
He does it in the first apology for sure. But yeah, you're right. So it gets followed a little bit more with Eusebius, but I think you're right. Justin Martyr actually.
And when everybody says no, Jesus's virgin birth had no pagan parallels. Go read Justin. Justin clearly says that Perseus was thought to be born of a virgin.
What's this?
Rebuke and reprove. Please come on up. Let's have a
yes,
chat.
by all means, come on in. Mr. No contradictions here. You keep saying conspiracy, but I mean, the literature is out there for everyone for these to read these people's literature on the subject.
Yeah, and I do strongly recommend people do read Burton Mack's book, Who Wrote the New Testament, because it's a very, very important book, and it's actually uses fairly conservative assumptions. Like, he accepts Q as a document. He accepts that, the tradition goes back to before John the Baptist. All of that, like, basic understanding of first century Christianity, he accepts. But he still then says, but we can't know anything about what was going on back then. The books that we have don't really care about any of that.
So we somewhat run the gauntlet on the ones that I wanted to bring up. I thought we'd have more engagement from the crowd on examples of dishonesty. And I don't even mind pushing back on atheists or anti-theists that are engaging dishonestly, where we can see that there is narrative driving or that they're changing their story to try to make a position work. I don't mind. Anybody that's being dishonest, they're on the chopping block. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But yeah, rebuke and reproof. If you want to come in here, by all means, we would love to hear more on you. But I did want to.
There's a dichotomy here that's important to stress. If we just accept that it's a human nature thing, that people, when they're trying to put forward a position, will sometimes bend the rules or cheat to get their position to make more sense or sound better. That's exactly what we would expect if there was no God. So we wouldn't expect atheists to have some sort of magic, better arguing style than theists. We would expect them to be roughly the same if there is no God, because they're both people and there's just no structural difference between theists and atheists. But if there is a God, you would expect the God to try to get the people who are arguing for him to use methods that are honest and persuasive and that don't do things that are immoral.
Sure. I mean, since that is the mainstay, that's the doctorial position, is that lying is a sin and bearing false witness that it's wrong. You would think if that is something ordained from a prime mover, that wouldn't be inside of his followers to use that. But we get this with Paul. We get this, not only do I've become all things to all people, which is something we don't totally know what it is that he's saying, but we get others about a silver tongue and being. I'm trying to think of the terminology that he used. It's not, he didn't say to use a silver tongue or something, but it was something like that he might, to win people.
With the tongues of angels, if it is without love, I am but a clanging bell or something like that.
Right. There's another one too, though. I'd have to think about the subject more.
Well, the other weird thing is that Paul consistently talks about how the congregations that he's met in the past could have confused him for an angel or for Jesus himself, which is a little odd. It's a little strange that people thought that Paul was Jesus. That's a little odd. But when you read Lucian of Samosata on the passing of Peregrinus, you see that this actually wasn't all that odd, right? Lucian has Peregrinus being regarded as a divine being by Christians.
Yeah. What's weird is, like, I think most of the Christian literature tries to play down people that are kind of becoming almost idol-like people, that they don't want to share the stage of Jesus with anyone else. So we see this in John the Baptist. Like, what we generally get is, like, we get Mark, Matthew, Luke, and then John, and we get developmental ideas that become more and more developmental and they expand more. But one thing that we see that closes up more and not expands more from these book secessions is, like, John the Baptist and how much they talk about him. Mark talks about John the Baptist more than any of them. Right. And then the next is Matthew, and then Luke barely talks about him at all. And then John, I mean, there's almost nothing about John the Baptist mentioned. But the problem is there's already this, like, people confuse John the Baptist with Jesus. John the Baptist's ministry seems to be something that Jesus started with. John the Baptist baptized him. So he's kind of this big icon, but they don't want to share this stage with someone like John. So progressively, John has become very unimportant. They've stepped him down.
And Luke says he must increase and us decrease.
Yeah.
It might be John that says that. But I mean,
I think it's
what's
John.
What's important for me is the idea that at some point in the writing of the Gospels,
it's John.
It was a live option that Jesus was the resurrected John the Baptist.
Yeah.
Now, John the Baptist didn't die until 36 CE.
You're talking about from the Josephus?
John dies in 36.
Right, that's
Pilate
where Josephus puts
was no longer the procurator of Judea in 36. He left. So if the live possibility that John resurrected as Jesus, then Jesus couldn't have died before 36 CE because John didn't die until 36 CE.
Yeah,
there's a real timeline problem.
We get, and I don't remember if he went to Galilee or he left from Galilee after he heard about what happened to John, but I know that what happened with John made a decision in the movement of Jesus when he found out that he died, right? So that there's this idea that
Again,
now it's affected.
The narrative that we have in the Gospels is not possible to be involving the historical characters that we are sure of. I don't think it's a serious position to say that John the Baptist didn't exist at all, because we have a religion that still exists today that still worships John the Baptist.
Sure.
And that we do have, like, contemporary, or at least near contemporary attestation with Josephus, who actually talks about a movement around this guy. So I think that's very reasonable to accept that John the Baptist is a real person and had a real following. And the Gospels are constantly trying to deal with John the Baptist. So it just does not to me, it just does not possibly make sense that the narrative that we have is exactly how a historical Jesus would have interacted with a historical John the Baptist.
So let me address some of this nonsense that I'm seeing come from Rebuke and Reprove, that critical scholarship has abandoned actual empirical support for their innuendo. The idea that they have an innuendo that has arisen compared to the idea that critical scholarship has begun to slowly but surely abandon innuendo, that is to support the narrative of Christ and everything being real and genuine. This is what's happening. If there's an innuendo shift that is going on here, you're seeing an innuendo disappear that doesn't pledge allegiance to the ideal anymore of non-contradiction and inerrancy and all of these kind of allegiance pledges that are going on. And as that vanishes, and we have honest interactions with the text and honest interactions with the historical a purview in which they were said, then we're getting people that are getting further and further away from older ideas of older scholarship is what's going on here. They just don't have the innuendo anymore. And you're seeing a shift that they don't think that all of this is empirically and completely inerrant and true.
Yeah, again, what we see in the text of the New Testament is like what we would see if we had a Dwight D. Eisenhower recreating the presidency of John Kennedy. Right? It doesn't make sense. The timeline doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's not just this. And Rebuke and Reprove knows this. There's this internal struggle with different people. We talk about all these different contradictions, and there's one of the biggest contradictions that has ever come down the pipe. And now we act like it's not even a thing. We don't even worry about it anymore. And that is Matthew chapter 1's account of the lineage upside of Luke chapter 3's account of the lineage. And both of them clearly say the father of Joseph. The father of Joseph. So they track it to Joseph. And what has happened inside of apologetics and Christians that want to hold this inerrancy is they say, well, Heli, the father of Joseph, was really talking about Mary's father. So that was basically his stepfather, and he was being referred to as the father.
His father-in-law, wasn't it?
Right. His father-in-law. I'm sorry, his father-in-law. So they just insert this in there with absolutely no basis of this. But their entire basis is that it can't be wrong. It just can't be wrong. So they shift this and they make this up. It's the same reason they invented the damn tree for in the field, because we get two different accounts with Judas, one that he got hung and the one that he held long in a field. But the one that says that he left the temple and then he went and hung himself straightway, he was inside of the city. He wasn't out in a damn field. He could have hung himself anywhere in the city. He could have went back to his tavern and hung himself. He could have hung himself from any building. A tree wasn't necessary in the scene at all. And when he was in the field,
the whole story of Judas is just recreating Hebrew scripture tropes. The betrayal with a kiss is the betrayal of Joab. The hanging on a tree is a recreating of Absalom. The 30 pieces of silver is from one of the major prophets. I forget exactly which one right now. So there's nothing of this that we can't construct from the previous literary sources.
But that's not in the literature. The tree isn't in the literature. That's a manifestation that Christianity has created to rectify the two verses. There's nothing about a tree.
Correct.
So what we have is he just fell headlong in the field. So what's happening is now we have this psycho projection of a tree that is a necessary object to rectify the two different scriptures, because how could he hang himself in a field? Well, he doesn't need to hang himself in a field. That's a completely, totally different vocabulary. You're making the necessity that he hangs himself in the field because you're trying to rectify it with the other script. And we're doing the same thing with, not only do we create the tree, now we create the father-in-law that he's now calling Heli, right? You're just adding shit in there to make it not contradictory. It's nonsense.
I don't know if you saw it, but C.J. Cornthwaite had an interview with James McGrath about the first two or three chapters of Luke, where McGrath tries to argue that the original text of that was all about John the Baptist, and that it didn't actually originally have anything to do with Jesus at all. And if that's the case, that's an even stronger like argument for the Baptist being primary.
Huh. Yeah, I think I want to read a book on John the Baptist. I know that we've had a few different people that do interviews that have interviewed a gentleman that wrote 2 different books on John the Baptist. And I really need to get a good book on John the Baptist. I've read a little bit of the different like extra biblical literature and the concepts around John the Baptist. And I know that he had a movement that proceeded way after, again, as you mentioned, I think it still goes on even to this day.
Right, the man exists to this day.
Right. And I think we even get some ideas like in the Muslim faith. I think John the Baptist is mentioned in Muslim documentation. And so I think John the Baptist was a really big thing. And I do think that the secession of like from Mark all the way to John kind of slowly but surely tried to put a lid on him, but not share the stage with him. But he was, in some sense, seen as something of a Messiah to some degree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, just to clarify, my position is that we know for sure that there were Qumran sectarians, there were Essenes, and there were who followed John the Baptist. To the degree that they were similar or different, we don't know, but we know those existed prior to the destruction of the temple. And Eusebius claims that the Essenes were Christian. Eusebius claims that Philo is a Christian. He claims that the Therapeutae in Alexandria were Christian. So if Eusebius is going to say that, he's probably not saying it because he's trying to make Christianity seem more sensible. He's doing it because there's so many people around who are aware of that tradition that he can't really deny it. Yeah. So if that's the case, then we have even stronger reasons to think that there's not a necessary need for a founder figure in Galilee in the late 3rd, early 4th decade.
Sorry, I muted again here. I have questions about different stuff that Eusebius cites because we can't really find some of that. He cites what he says is papyrus of
Papias. We know of only through Eusebius, and we don't have any other extra Eusebian testimony to him. Right. So if we read In the Stand by Stephen King about a book that is mentioned only in The Stand, right. Can't find other evidence of that book existing, we can only say that we're getting what information we get from that from The Stand. We can't cite that other book as if it exists separate from The Stand. And there's two people that Eusebius does that with, Papias and Hegesippus, which what you'll see in people arguing about patristics is that they'll quote Papias and quote Hegesippus as if they're separate texts that we have separately and have attestation to separately. No, those only come from Eusebius, who is a liar.
So when we get like the attribution of the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to who they are, I think our earliest document that we get that is attributing those is about 180. But if you read Eusebius seems to be saying that there's another document that goes back as like 110 or 120 that is attributing those to being written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah. He's using
we know Papias. That's an actual document, though.
Papias said that then.
That's it.
We don't have Papias for that, and we have Justin. And like again, Justin isn't the only 2nd century apologist who doesn't mention them. Most of the 2nd century apologists that we have what they wrote out, they don't mention the names of the Gospels at all. So Justin doesn't mention them. Minucius Felix doesn't mention them. Theophilus of Antioch doesn't mention him. An interesting name there, right? Beloved Theophilus. It's quite possible that maybe Gospels was actually written to this guy. We have Athenagoras. We have Tatian. Tatian wrote the Diatessaron and so was clearly aware of all four traditions, right? But he writes an apology. He doesn't mention the Gospels at all in his apology.
Hey, I just want to give you, I appreciate the peeps comments, Simos. How's it going, man? Yeah, I think there's a ton of dishonesty that's going on in our early church fathers and whatnot, and I think that Eusebius, among several others, has this idea that it's completely okay. It's completely okay to lie because it's all in the service of Christ, and that there's not a problem with it. And I think they even have something of a drawn out ideological construct about this that says that it's okay to do this because it's all ultimately in the greater service of the truth of Christ. So they kind of brush it away that it's okay to be dishonest in this as long as it's serving the mission, that is Christ. And I think to some degree,
one of the sources of dishonesty, I think, might be in the actual name of the movement. Because there's loads of evidence from the patristics in the late 2nd century that there were people who thought the name was the Christianoi with an eta and not an iota. And when you use the nomina sacra, all you're showing is the chi, the r, and the s, right? You don't show the vowel. So a lot of the earliest traditions just show the nomina sacra, but they don't show the vowel. And you have Tertullian claiming that the Marcionite, other pagans say Christianoi when it's really Christianoi. But in Sinaiticus, in the book of Acts in Sinaiticus, there's several places where the whole word is spelled out. And what we can see is that it was originally an eta, and then it's been overwritten to be an iota.
Yeah, but we get just the X and the C a lot.
Correct. Mostly you get the nomina sacra, but in Sinaiticus, you have Christianoi written out a couple of points in Acts, and it was originally with an eta, not an iota. And Christianoi means the good ones. And when you read those 2nd century apologetics, they're all about how ethical all the Christians are and how their ethical behavior is impeccable. And again, look at Paul. What is Paul's big issue? Be righteous, be ethical, be good to one another. Like, don't do wrongs, don't be sexually improprietous. Like, all these things about Paul are all about ethics and behavior. So Christianoi is actually more of a forced reading. And when you notice that Paul keeps using the nomina, like all of the Paul texts that we have use the nomina sacra, we're not actually sure what vowel Paul was knows.
Yeah, I'm not highly familiar with that. That is an interesting subject. I wanted to let everybody know this is open chat. Anyone can come in here. I encourage anyone to step in here and have the conversation with us. We're primarily talking about dishonesty of theists, or dishonesty even of atheists or anti-theists that are misrepresenting their position, and to what degree they know that they're misrepresenting. What degree do they know or should reasonably know that they're lying, or whether we even want to soften that tone, that they're just not being consistent in their positioning. By all means,
I would say bullshitting is just right next to lying. In some ways, worse. Frankfurt says that it's worse because at least the liar is living in the world of truth and falsehood, whereas the bullshitter is just doing behavioral manipulation.
Well, it seems like that there's this loyalty that's going on to their ideas, and that there has to be this linchpin. Like, we're not building things from the ground up. We have a thing that we've already hung on something. Correct. And that this is what's going on, is that we're trying to build it opposite. We have this idea hung, and then we just need to show the artificial structures and make it look as if this is being held up. But as long as we can't let that idea fall, which it won't fall to start with, because it's not being propped up from the bottom, it's being held from the top, so to speak. Right. But we're just showing an artificial.
Getting back to the beginning when we talked about the junkyard argument, right? The only reason that people are anti-evolution is because they understand that the plan of salvation doesn't really work as well if there has been evolution. Like, evolution is hard to explain the plan of salvation within. So I get that there are Christians who believe in the plan of salvation who also accept evolution, but I will just say that the fact that 40% of Americans today do not accept evolution is strong inductive evidence that the plan of salvation is difficult to square with evolution.
Yeah, I don't think the number's that high at a national level. Last I saw, though, it is older polls. I hadn't seen the
I'm not
2024
talking about
poll.
young Earth creationists. I'm saying don't accept evolution.
Right. I thought that number at a national level was only about 18 to 20%. But that was before the 20.
I could be wrong. It's possible
Yeah.
that I'm wrong. Even if it's 20%, it's still way too high.
It is way too high. Yeah,
But
I
I
agree.
did
But in
see a
areas,
survey recently.
but in areas like Louisiana, we have numbers as high as 45% that don't accept evolution. So those numbers are ridiculously high in some of the Bible Belt states and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I have seen numbers where it's not that they're saying the Earth is young, but they're saying they don't accept the evolutionary origin of humans with only natural processes, which to me is saying you don't accept evolution.
Yeah.
Like, to me, if you're an old Earth intelligent design advocate, I think you're actually accepting evolution.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an interesting subject that got brought up here by Beam here. Is bluffing lying? Because apologists do that a lot, pretend that like they know things that they don't know. It's not just that they don't know them, they can't be known. And this is the disconnect that we have. This is the whole existence of the God of the Gaps. This is what their bread and butter is, because when we have a space in civilization at our highest scientific level that we don't have a good explanation for that yet. We don't know how that's working. This is where the God of the Gaps argument comes flying in and says, ha ha, we have an explanation for how that's working. God is doing it. And this is a type of, you don't know that. And over and over, every group that has held that, whether it's the volcanoes are erupting because gods are angry or anything like this, has slowly but surely been proven that that is not why. But that position held, and they held that position until we had some kind of physical phenomenon, a natural phenomenon that accounted for why that thing was happening. And now where they exist in apologetics is they've finally been backed all the way back to, we don't know how it all began. We don't know what the cause is. And because we don't know that, there's a jump forth and say, aha, I know where it come from. And this declaration of knowledge that they cannot possibly know.
Yeah, I've had conversations over the last couple of weeks with people where I say, look, if you think that the reason to believe in God is like Big Bang cosmology and your particular understanding of modern physics, then you're saying that there was no good reason to believe in Christianity until the 20th century, and that the vast majority of Christians through human history had no justification for their belief, whether it was true or not. And if that's the case, that's fine. You can make that argument. That's okay. But it's not going to be a compelling argument that Christianity is true if the very people who created the structure of the belief did not have access to the critical facts that establish its truth.
Yeah, that is a very damning position that would show that the early church, that they were believing something and that they didn't have this. If this is the basis upon which to believe, they didn't have this to start with. But what I think is even more damning than that is that we've had many Christians that when we had an older cosmological model that everything was stable and it wasn't expanding, for example, I'm going to let you in just a second, Simos, that it wasn't expanding, for example, they then used that as, aha, evidence of God, that things are stable, and that things aren't collapsing. Aha, evidence of God. And then we find out, no, that's not happening. We actually came from an origin place and it's all expanding. What do they say? Aha, evidence for God. So It doesn't matter what the model is. It's all going to be evidence for God.
Yeah, and going back to C.S. Lewis, like C.S. Lewis was really nervous about Big Bang cosmology. And he said, like, you should believe in Christ whether there was a Big Bang or not. It doesn't matter one direction or the other about Christ, which I actually agree with, right? I can't imagine how you could possibly try to make an argument that Jesus died on the cross because there was a Big Bang.
Yeah. Simos, what's happening, man? I love your picture here, man. You got to start using that one.
Yeah, well, that's me with a chip butty. So, yeah.
How you been feeling, man?
Yeah, no, very good, very good. Looking forward. Of course, I'll be on Dave's later. Saturday night at the Atheists, of course. But I was intrigued by the title that you've given this to all theists lie to defend their beliefs. I think that's strong. All is definitely too strong for me personally. Some do, like I've coined a phrase. I don't know if you know the phrase I'm talking about.
Let's hear it.
Irreducible stupidity.
Irreducible stupidity. Okay.
Good one.
Yeah.
Fair.
So that's what I think. He knows that he's being dishonest.
Right.
When he talks about irreducible complexity, he knows that's not a good argument. He's been shown it's not a good argument multiple times, and he still insists on using it and publishing it in books. And I think because he publishes it in books, that shows that he knows he's lying.
So let me tell you one of the things that I use as kind of an example to say, to kind of ask this question. What's her name from Bread of Life that does her? She did Rebecca from Bread of Life. She did a video a while back, and I went looking for it. I couldn't find the damn thing, but she did a video about her soup inside of a microwave, and that it would just come to life. You know, that evolutionists believe that this could just, spontaneously come to life.
Right.
And this is a variation, of the airplane argument, the tornado in the airplane, the old Boeing 747, just a symbol, right?
Just before you get to that, what's hilarious is that was the creationist position up until about the 17th century. Spontaneous generation was the standard understanding of how life existed prior to the 17th century. So that was the Christian position for centuries.
I can't remember the name of the guy, but he did an experiment. This is how scientific they were. He did an experiment where he left some cheese underneath like a hamper, and in the next morning when he woke up, there was a mouse or a rat in there. I think it was a mouse. And he said, "Look, it couldn't have got in anyway because I put something on top of the thing, so therefore it's spontaneously thing." But I love that. I love what I just like about the story you just told with Rebecca is that the soup, of course, that was alive, that had living plants presumably in it.
Right.
So I mean, it's possible that if you left it there on for long enough, it could spontaneously, by physics, recreate life itself, because it was living. It's living material,
Right. But the point was, whether it's with the aircraft or whether I know one of them is a lawnmower, that you're going to get a lawnmower out of it. If you just let it degrade, that the push mower that's rusting, if you let it degrade enough, it'll just turn into a riding lawnmower. Right. But anyway, but these have to, at very least, be seen as dishonest, because they know that this is not in any way resembling. It's not resembling the evolutionary claim. So it seems like what they're doing is they're putting a front on, and they know that this is such a straw man from this that it doesn't even resemble it. It's so different in every fundamental category that they're just misrepresenting the position. And this seems to me, at some point, we have to call this a lie. They know that they're doing this.
Well, again, that's why if I could, let me just get my definition of irreducible stupidity for you. Let me see, where is it? Irreducible stupidity. There we go. I got it here now. I'll type it into the chat so you can see it in chat. There we go. Let me see. It's back on. So irreducible stupidity isn't found in the uneducated. It's found in the educated who know better but defend a falsehood anyway. And that's why I use that phrase, because Behe clearly isn't uneducated.
Yeah.
Right,
and Rebecca isn't uneducated. As I said, she said, I was in a hangout with her and Sal once, and someone put in the question, why do you think so many Americans are creationists? And I like glibly just said, well, it's education, isn't it? It's just uneducated. And of course, both of them have got degrees, and both of them are creationists. So
I think there's something else going on, though. There's a strain of deliberate ignorance, right? There's a video I've seen where Andrew Tate is saying, I no longer care about evidence. Well, okay, that's deliberate ignorance. You are now saying that you have an affinity fixation for believing a certain way, and nothing's going to move you off of that. That's a kind of, Saul Kripke called that Kripkean dogmatism, where every piece of evidence you get just increases your belief in the thing you already believe, because you have an explanatory matrix where, well, of course, that's what they want you to think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're seeing some of that in the chat with some of the commenters.
I mean, for sure. But also, I just add, like, I'm not that hard on people, because I just think there's no point to being like, I don't know, overly derogative, I suppose. And some of these people are just repeating what they think their betters are saying.
Sure.
And that's what I mean by saying all theists. I'm not sure it's all theists. I think some are just not thinking about it, and they're just repeating what the educated ones are saying. You know?
But here's the thing: when we're building up a conclusion, right? And I was given the analogy earlier that we're building a foundation, and we're building from the bottom, and we get up to, we can know this thing, right? The idea that they have, we know that's not being built up from the bottom. That's hanging from the top. They've already got this concept that has an emotional connection. And then all they're doing is going through through the trend of showing that they can tie it back down to the ground. Oh, well, of course this is supported, but we know that's not holding the weight of the ideal. The weight of the ideal is being held for emotional reasons and whatnot. And then you're just building these artificial or pseudo legs.
Bundle of beliefs.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and
but these are just pseudo legs holding it up.
Yeah, I can't remember which atheist said this, but one of them did. I think it might have been Stephen Weinberg, actually. But he said something, I think it was him. He said something like, if I wanted to argue from authority, I'd be a Christian, because that is the ultimate argument from authority. And I think, I don't think it was Weinberg, actually. It was somebody else, but I can't remember who I found. And like again, if you're an unquestioning person, then that's how you look at the world. You look at it from arguments from authority that are genuine, and therefore, every time you hear one of these, like William Lane Craig say, "Oh, this is what atheists think," then that's it. You just take it for granted that is what atheists think. You don't sit there and go, "Well, I don't know any atheists, and I'm going to go and find out." By looking it up in Google, what would Google know? Google's part of the problem,
Yeah, and some of it is just maybe they're not, maybe when somebody like what's his name, that the built the ark guy, when he says something like that scientists just hate God, or there you go, Ken Ham, that atheists and scientists that they just rejected because they hate God. I mean, maybe this isn't just lying. Maybe this is that he genuinely cannot conceive of any way in which that somebody could not believe this thing, because he is so enthralled with these different concepts and ideas that he just imagines this to be the case because he can't imagine another way, right? But it at least seems dishonest that he hasn't engaged with anybody else, and he's calling them all liars, rather than engaging with, maybe they're telling the truth and they just can't find good reason to believe this.
Yeah, or maybe maybe like I'm saying, maybe they're just misinformed. He can't even consider that we're misinformed. Right?
No, because when I get into the mindset of what it was like to be one of those theists, like their belief about atheists is that they hate God, but their belief about Muslims is that they worship the devil. So
right.
The actual structure of what's going on in their mind, I don't think is necessarily falsehood. It's just this unbelievably simplified anthropology where you are either correct, and usually you're not correct just because you say you're a Christian, right? They all believe that the road is narrow that leads to salvation. They believe most Christians believe that most Christians are on the wrong path and have the wrong beliefs. And then they're going to believe that anybody who doesn't believe in Christ is just believing in demons. And then everybody who doesn't believe there's a God just hates the idea of God, because that's their anthropology. I honestly don't know that they hold it as something that they think is not true. I think they might actually believe that way because that gives them a great deal of psychological comfort.
It's interesting that it feels like that there's no thing that someone can't convince themselves of, as to the degree that it just has to align with the mainstay concept. So they have like this mainstay concept or cluster of concepts that they have to hold as true, and then everything else, it has to be a certain way because it has to align with that, right? It can't be another way. In the same way that you mentioned that evolution can't be true, because then that would cause a problem with like the salvation issue, and that the salvation thing just has to be true. So now everything just has to kind of bend and shift, and it doesn't seem that they mind doing all of the gymnastics that is involved with making that line up.
No, to defend theists a bit, and to use Simon's position here that he put in the chat, that's really good. It's important to recognize that this is not like unique to religious discussion. So there was a famous statistician, Fisher, who developed like the Fisher's t-test and lots of very important statistical methods that are still used today. And he was absolutely a genius, highly, highly educated. But he had a 2-pack per day cigarette habit. And he used his statistical knowledge to sell to the tobacco companies an entire theory that the reason that cigarette smokers got lung cancer was because people who had a genetic predisposition to get lung cancer also had a genetic predisposition to smoke. So that's just
good stuff.
I don't know that that was a lie. He very well could genuinely have believed that. It's unbelievably stupid. Like, it's so stupid, it harms your mind to even think about it. But he was a genius. And one of the things that geniuses can do is that they can create a structure where, like, it's impervious to external correction and unfalsifiable. So I don't know that he was lying. I know he was wrong.
Yeah. So let me give you an opposite of that happened with a cereal company that's what's the name of Cheerios. The Cheerios, they used to have the commercial that Cheerios is heart healthy and that it'll help you lose weight. And after a big lawsuit on the way that they marketed, they then changed it to that people who eat Cheerios tend to weigh less, is now what the slogan got changed to. And the ideal was that they were selling the idea that there is a correlation between those people who eat Cheerios and those people who are losing weight. But it is only happening because you got a group of people who want to lose weight, and people are telling them that eating Cheerios will do it. So then you have a correlation of the group. So now you're saying people who eat Cheerios tend to weigh less, but you're not saying that Cheerios is what's making it happen.
And it's much worse, because the argument as formed originally is that eating Cheerios will make you lose weight, which literally
that was the original.
Can't be the case with the laws of the universe.
Right.
Eating is how you gain weight, not how you lose weight.
Right. But that was the original argument, and that lost big time in the lawsuit, that it was false marketing and whatnot. And now they're doing the correlation thing. We've seen this with coffee things as well, that people who drink coffee tend to be more successful. Well, people who wake up early in the morning tend to be both more successful, right, and they tend to drink more coffee. But there's not a direct correlation. There's a C correlation. But that's a very interesting thing. But if you could convince yourself that A is causing B, I guess you could just convince yourself of that.
No, I think, again, when you look at all the studies on motivated reason, like if a company supports a researcher and the grant is funded through the company, the research is something like 50 to 70% more likely to get findings that are beneficial to the economic interests of the company that's funding the research. But that doesn't mean that the researcher is lying or cheating necessarily. It just means that he's a human being who's understands on which side his bread is buttered.
But here's the point that I was making with the cereal one. Whether the cereal company was knowingly lying or they weren't, it was negligent that they were saying something that was objectively not true. So the court held them responsible. Whether the court put the finger on them and said, hey, you're an absolute liar or not, doesn't seem to be relevant. That they could have easily, with any kind of critical thinking, concluded that A is not causing B.
Right. It
So
can
they
be a
were held
prejudice claim
responsible
even if
for
you
it.
believe it.
Right.
So, and the other thing is the Upton Sinclair line, right? It's very hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
That's a hard one to argue with.
Yeah, I mean that's Ken Ham right there. Isn't it?
Right.
There you go. That's Ken Ham. Well, and you had this with the group with that the gentleman named Dan something that led the project of deconversion of pastors, where pastors were calling
Dan
in
Barker.
and talked about. Yes, exactly. Dan Barker, he led this whole project, and the pastors. The whole problem was the pastors that were reaching them, like their whole life is entrenched in this. They've done this the whole life. They don't even have skills, developed to make a living anywhere else. So how do they wind up pulling away from this? They're still presently preaching, but they don't believe in a God. So what do? That's a difficult situation. And how to some degree can you not believe something that is your whole livelihood is dependent on you believing that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, I think, also because literally nothing changes for them. I mean, God objectively doesn't exist, so it's not like when they were preaching there really was a God that they were representing. Right? They're still in the same position. They're just preaching for the community and trying to do their best, presumably, for their community. Although I understand that there's some.
Hey man, good talking to you as always, Kurt.
But it's been a great panel. Nice talking to you, Simon.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. I don't know your name. Robert. It's not on screen, but
that's Kurt, man.
Oh,
Kurt.
Okay.
He's over at Bloodbath. Take care, Kurt.
Yeah,
have a good one, man.
Pleasure to hear your comments. I haven't got too long either. I've only got a few minutes.
Me either. I'm about to be wrapping it up. But as you've seen mentioned from Objective Ethics, everybody hit that like button for me. I appreciate it. I'm trying to grow this channel, but I'll be honest with you, this will be the second live stream. Haven't grown a single subscriber. I need to start doing more of the short videos. I think I was doing better on them. But I enjoy this format more and engaging with people in this way. I do enjoy it more than just making punchy videos at something.
I like the punchy videos as well.
Sure, I know it's quick. It's non-committal. Just go watch a short. That's why I think Dade Murphy is so successful. It's quick, it's punchy, it takes no time, and everybody enjoys a good little smile off of it. And that seems to be very successful model. Maybe I'll have to start doing more of that.
Yeah, I think so. But either way, it's a tough game, especially this late in the season. Yeah. I mean. Gone are the days where you could just start putting the word atheist into your channel title and pick up 3,000 or 4,000 views in all the subs. Yeah.
Gone are those days, I do suppose.
Yeah.
But I generally only run these for 2 hours, and I actually do go by Dave's myself and listen in for a little bit. So I am fixing to be wrapping it up. I appreciate everybody for joining. I thank Kurt and Simos for stopping by. Simos, you have a link that you want to put in there that I'll put in.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I have so few views on my channel; it makes no difference whatsoever.
I hear you. Well, I appreciate you stopping by.
I'll duck out now so you can get your goodbyes said. All right, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good one, man. But yeah, I think next Saturday in the evening, I'm going to do a show, and I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I think in the evening, I'm fixing to be on Mighty Filbert's channel. I'll be talking over there with him. I think it's going to be something of an internet format. I haven't checked the email to see what's going on, but I do believe that'll be the case next Saturday, I think around 9 or whatnot, but I'll have a regular show and I'll put an update as far as what's going on. But as always, I thank everybody for joining. I thank you for watching. Remember, stay critical, be honest, try to engage with people honestly in these debates. And thank you for watching again. Take care.